I think it might even confuse ChatGPT. There's so much nuance. And I think that's, one of the things where if you're working with corn and soybean farmers in the Midwest, like you really have to know that geography.
One, two, three.
Coming up, this is really a podcast for those ag psychos out there. We're talking math in agriculture with Ariel Patton. The Modern Acre is the podcast for builders in ag who think differently. If you'd like to dig deeper with The Modern Acre, check out our membership community, The Modern Acre Co-op.
The Modern Acre is presented by Corteva Agriscience. Corteva combines industry-leading innovations, high-touch customer engagement, and operational execution to profitably deliver solutions for the world's most pressing agriculture challenges. Corteva generates advantaged market preference through its unique distribution strategy, together with its balanced and globally diverse mix of seed, crop protection, and digital products and services. With some of the most recognized brands in agriculture and a technology pipeline well-positioned to drive growth, the company is committed to maximizing productivity for farmers while working with stakeholders throughout the food system as it fulfills its promise to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume, ensuring progress for generations to come.
All right, guys, we have Ariel back on the podcast this week. You guys are winding down for Thanksgiving. We are winding up, okay? We're talking math, units of measure in agriculture with Ariel. If you're not familiar, Ariel Patton has a newsletter all about frameworks for agriculture. It's really breaking it down to how to understand ag better. We bring her on the podcast to dive deeper, the color commentary, if you will, for her newsletter. And this was a really fun conversation where we talk about Tim's least favorite subject in school, math. I think a lot of good stuff in here about even ag tech companies, how to think about how important it is to understand units of measure within agriculture, understand your market better. Be sure, before we jump in here, guys, be sure to subscribe to Ariel's newsletter, Topsoil. It will be linked in the show notes. She's coming out with a new edition very soon, so you won't want to miss that. So subscribe and make sure you get it in your inbox coming soon. Let's jump into this conversation with Ariel. Hey, Ariel, welcome back to the show. We're excited to dig in on math. Math in ag. I love it. Tim is like, I could see Tim sweating over there thinking about having to do calculations on the podcast, but we are excited to have you back. Excited to talk a new edition of Topsoil, your newsletter. We all actually have new jobs since we last spoke, which is kind of wild. You took a role at Interplant, so give us the quick update there before we jump in.
Yeah, great to be back, guys. And I couldn't let you two be the only ones that are having fun with the new job. So I joined the team at Interplant, and I'm working on the product team over there. But it's just been a really awesome experience so far. Really exciting product. We engineer plants so that they can signal when they're under stress. And so, what that looks like, our first product it's a soybean that fluoresces. It glows when there's disease pressure. And it actually does that weeks before a human eye could see symptoms of that disease. So it just results in a lot of benefits where the farmer can treat their crop, in a much more timely manner, and only, when and where that's needed. So a lot of great benefits there for the customer, and it's been just a great team. So it's been a lot of fun so far.
Super cool. So is it like seed genetics or a seed treatment? Like, how is this commercialized?
Yeah, so it's bioengineering. It is genetically engineering the plant.
It's so cool. Tim and I were just talking about the other day, like there's more and more tech coming to agriculture that feels like science fiction, right? Like it feels like how can this work? And Interplant is one I heard about. I don't know, Tim, we heard about it a few years ago and we're like, man, this is pretty wild if this can work. And so it's cool to hear, you talking about commercialization, right? And taking those next steps from R&D to commercial trials and continuing to scale. So it seems like a really exciting time to join the company. We got to get Shelly on the pod at some point to dig into the whole story.
Absolutely.
Well, Ariel, why don't you jump into the newsletter this month? Give us kind of overview of why you went to math and units and measures in ag this time.
Definitely. So yeah, so with Topsoil, which I guess is my evening and weekend job. So this month I covered napkin math, and there won't be a quiz at the end. Don't worry. But I really wanted to cover this one because I have learned, probably the hard way, knowing a customer's, a farmer's world, that requires knowing some of the jargon, some of just the units and measurements that make up their world. And there's a really fast way you can lose credibility. And that is if you, make a estimation that's just not even in the ballpark, or you're using the wrong units. It's a very fast way to just show that you don't really know what you're talking about. And so I've put in a lot of time on thinking about, I have like Post-it notes on my desk of like, what are different units that I can remember, just different conversions, rules of thumb. And so I just really wanted to pull that together and package it up and share that with other folks who, might be newer to acres, bushels, and just make that learning curve a little easier for other folks.
Yeah, it's a super fun topic. When I saw the edition come out, I kind of smiled because every time I talk to my dad about something going on the farm, like inevitably a scratch pad comes out and he starts writing numbers of kind of doing different conversions about whatever we're talking about. Like it comes up all the time on the farm, like when we're talking about planting and seed density of how many seeds per acre do we need and what's the bed configuration, is it 60-inch beds or 80s, and what that means for the seed density. When we're talking about kind of commercial contracting terms, is it a price per ton, price per pound, and kind of doing those conversions back and forth, and even kind of like spreading materials. We were applying some rock dust this fall for some off-season practices, and there's a recommended kind of rate per acre where it's 500 to 1,000 pounds per acre that you need to spread, and trying to calibrate the spreader and calibrate the tractor of how many RPMs, what the mile per hour is. Like it's all math to kind of figure out how to get that. It's not as straightforward as just looking at a rate and that's it.
100%. And I think that's really one of those things about farming and farmers in general is like they're doing so much math in their day to day. Like you said, you just rattled off like 10 different examples. There's calculating tank mixes, and there's just a lot of math that goes into it. And so I have a really deep appreciation for that. And also, if you're someone who works in the industry, is serving farmers, really being able to be aware of that and knowledgeable only is going to make you a better salesperson, service person, whatever that is, product developer, because you can make your service or product really, work for that environment. I think doing that napkin math early, you can save a lot of pain later on when you have good assumptions, reasonable numbers. I think you can. There's always noise and uncertainty, but at least you can kind of get directionally heading in the right direction with some of this like good estimations there.
I totally agree with you, and I think the point about credibility, like I think I probably lost a lot of credibility with my dad and my oldest brother when we first started getting involved in the farm, because I just was like so confused. And to Tim's point earlier, when we were looking at like some of our contracts for the crops we grow, some are, we talk about in price on the price side, price per pound, price per ton. And some crops, like we interchange between them. And so it's super important. And, it's that this is kind of industry specific stuff that I think is really important for people that are new to the industry to understand the complexities. And I think if there's a takeaway, right, it's like go in eyes wide open, that you don't assume everything, and don't assume a farmer is going to use the same unit of measure that you're assuming. You should know kind of best practices and everything, but coming in with an air of humility, I think is probably important. I was just looking at you talked a bit more about row crops, kind of focused in the newsletter, but you linked out to this 77-page document from the USDA on weights, measures, and conversion factors for agricultural commodities and their products. So it's just
Light bedtime reading.
yeah, if in your spare time, if anyone listening wants to figure out how, let's see, I was just looking at a fun one. Asparagus was what the unit of measure for asparagus is. It's a crate. Avocados is a lug. Bananas are cartons. And then Tim, I thought you'd appreciate this one. I found something that we grow. Cucumbers is 1 1/9 bushel. Also carton per crate. So this is just an example. We got to throw this 77-page document into ChatGPT and then just ask ChatGPT questions.
I think it might even confuse ChatGPT. There's so much nuance. And
Yeah.
I think that's, one of the things where if you're working with corn and soybean farmers in the Midwest, you really have to know that geography, that crop or those crops, and even, nuances specific to a farm. And like Tim, for your guys' farm, there's dozens of different crops that anyone who works with you needs to know. I think, Tyler, your takeaway on having that humility and also just doing the research to know your customer's context is really key here. I think one other piece there is that in this really, tight margin environment, tough economic environment that we're in right now with agriculture, you hear a lot of companies talking about ROI, and you hear, customers saying I'm only going to do something, make a purchase, make a decision if it's ROI positive. And so that's just one of those things that, everybody's saying. And I pulled that out a little bit in this edition because I really want people to be able to break that down. And what does it mean to be ROI positive to the farmer? And so, what that means is that the return that you're getting from that investment, from that purchase, if you subtract out the cost of that investment and you divide it by the cost of the investment, you get a percentage, and that's the ROI. And so ideally, you're going to get more out of something than the dollars you put in. But I think it's, and I'll love to hear from you on this, Tim. I think beyond just the purchase price, there's so many other financial costs that are, do you have to buy other systems? Do you have to hire additional labor to get a new purchase or investment working for your farm? Not to mention the non-financial costs of the hassle and the time, the mental energy, all of that. So I just wanted to pull that example out because I think that can actually be useful for listeners to think about. There's a lot under the hood on ROI.
Yeah, it's not always purely financial. There's a huge operational component as well, as how easy is this to integrate in making those trade-offs as well. For us, some of the typical ROI decisions, sometimes it's buy versus lease or rent. If we're looking at tractors that we need for a couple months during the season, that probably makes more sense just to get from PAR and rent a tractor for a month or two. There's irrigation assets that sometimes we will lease a filter station for the season where we have mobile drip stations versus buying those systems outright and making the decision between do we want to rent sprinkler pipe for garlic or go drip irrigation? And there's all these kind of downstream operational impacts of making those decisions. So those ones definitely come to mind on kind of the labor harvesting front. We've on peppers, done a mixture of hand harvest and machine harvest. And there's trade-offs there where it's more economical to machine harvest, but that process is a little bit slower. So for hand harvesting banana peppers, we might get 3 or 4 loads a day. And if we're running the machine, with much less labor, slightly cheaper, but we're getting 1 to 1.5 loads a day. So it's much slower. So it's do we want to get the crop out quickly and go that, or take, extend the season by trying to go all machine harvest, and then you have fruit starting to turn the corner and quality declining. So it's not always as straightforward as machine harvest 100% because that is cheaper.
I think the other thing that the whole industry is thinking about right now is just farmers needing a quicker ROI, right? Because ROI also has this time component, right? It could be ROI positive over 3 years potentially, or if we're talking about an expensive robotic weeder, right? It could be 5+ years. And I think farmers are thinking more short term because they have to, of what areas of opportunity is going to save me money now, and like on this crop, or make me more money on this crop. To Tim's point around the machine harvester, that's something that we can kind of make that decision for a particular year. The multi-year ROI is, I think, a little tougher to swallow for growers right now. And, stuff like that is, big investment in like a long-term permanent crop, or like, again, robotics and equipment is have those multiple years. And then on the kind of biological side of experimenting with different biological options that you can maybe see in a year, but you don't know, that's kind of you're going into a situation of the trial where you actually don't know if it's going to be ROI positive, but you're gonna put the money in and then maybe reinvest the following year where you had success, and you can double down on that success. So I think the time horizon is something that's, I think, very top of mind for growers.
Absolutely. And I have on the cheat sheet a concept called, the payback period. I've heard growers use this idea of, how many years is it going to take to pay off, for this investment to pay off, or this purchase to pay off. And I think a related concept that I really liked how this particular grower used this concept of like, how many bushels is this going to cost me? It really made, me think about like how tangible, how many, bushels to purchase this, piece of equipment or piece of software. And so like an example would be, say a piece of equipment costs $250K, and, if it works for corn, prices around $4 a bushel, this is going to cost you 60,000 bushels, right? Like, so when you really think about that, that's it just makes you kind of visualize that a little bit better. And then if you want to put it in terms of, okay, well, what size farm could even make that purchase and have that make sense? And, if you divide that by 200 acres or 200 bushels per acre, you're spending 300 acres worth of your crop on one piece of equipment, right? And so just thinking about, as you're pricing your product, how are growers thinking about it, and what's that tangible unit? I just think those conversions are really useful and interesting to think about for gut checking. Does this price make sense? And what does that mean for who can purchase this particular product or service?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it in perspective, thinking about your harvest and what you're sacrificing to make that investment. One thing I saw this year that I really, really enjoyed, we did a biological trial, and like sometimes you do these trials and it's like really hard to like know, like, did it work? Did it not work? Was it just the weather or whatever season like impacting things? We worked with a company that actually hired an independent research group to do like an actual like yield test, where like sometimes you get, and like we've talked about in previous episodes, of like yield is really like the main thing that growers care about when running these trials. And so like hiring a third party to actually do like a scientific, like 10 on the test side, 10 on the control side, to do a really complete yield analysis that's not kind of biased, of like, if you're just going to go anecdotally like take a look, it's hard to know if that's actually accurate. So like bringing in a third party into the mix to kind of quantify some of this stuff, I think is really impactful.
I'm curious to hear, Tim, I'm sure you get approached all the time by different companies trying to sell, different products or services. Is there anything that those folks do that really, make them stand out, that they know your business, whether it's knowing lugs, cartons, all the different units, or anything else? Just curious to hear.
Yeah, definitely. I think like with us having the podcast, I think gives people an opportunity to like get to know us and what we're doing a little bit more than probably most farms, just because we're vocal with it. So yeah, like understanding our crop mix and our operation a little bit more. I think ones that come in and kind of like are the crawl, walk, run approach of like not being like just overly like we're going to solve all your problems with this one thing, of like we're a complex operation. We're farming 10 plus different crops, and it's very nuanced. So ones that are kind of like coming in with a humble approach, like definitely more interesting for us. I think some of the challenges like operational, of like we'd love to trial 20 different things, but we just don't have like the resources to manage all those trials. And so like we've had to say no to things, of like, there's, let's 3 things let's try this year that we can execute, that we can like all internally be aligned on, that let's give this a go. So yeah, it's a point where we'd love to do more, but you just can't manage all these different trials and kind of have that be a positive outcome when you have just too many things going on.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think like 2 frame of references is farmers are just, when they look at new opportunities, they're trying to identify risk, and it's financial risk and it's operational risk, right? So like having to look through those lens of, maybe it's a great potential financial opportunity, but what is the operational risk to the business? Or vice versa. Maybe it's super easy to implement, but it's not really worth it. The potential savings or ROI isn't there to it's not worth it, right? The sweet spot is when you can get it's something that's generally easy to implement and it won't completely blow up the operation, but also has a potential big financial outcome. And I think that's what's really interesting. I just think about ag tech is like people exploring these different business models or pricing models rather, of like the price per acre versus other units of measures. So I think there's a lot of strategy to go into what makes sense. I think when times are good, the price per acre, when the commodity prices are good, it's like, oh yeah, it's just like, a few bucks out of that better price. But when times are tough, I think farmers are a little bit more savvy about, what they're willing to pay for when the margins are smaller. So I think we might see that even, right? It's just pricing models be a little fluid depending on the farm economy. Because what companies can get away with.
One other thing to add too is just like for some of these trials that we've done, the ones that we've like moved forward with is when the company is really like bought into designing a trial and not just selling a product and walking away, but being there for the entire season, having a presence on farm to kind of check in on things and really like show at the end of the season, positive or negatively, how that impacted like on the rock dust that I mentioned earlier. Like we were interested in adding remineralized rock dust to the operation. We don't have a spreader to actually do that. It's an expensive machine. They're like $50,000 for this like very basic spreader. And so like if it was like, here, try this rock dust, like we're not going to go buy a spreader for some kind of like new operation for the system. Like they came in and said like, what spreader do you want? What's going to work best for your system? Like we'll get that. We'll get it delivered to your farm and make it very like turnkey for you. So like being kind of that value add, going above and beyond and not just like dropping off a product and expecting the grower to run with it.
That's great to hear. Speaking of you guys being the modern acre, do you guys know the origin of the word acre?
I don't think so.
Blow minds.
Okay. This is a fun fact that I uncovered doing the research, but an acre was originally the area that 2 oxen could plow in a single day. So because it's kind of like this arbitrary measurement, when you think about it today, it's basically the size of a football field minus the end zones. But yeah, fun fact.
Ty, are we the 2 oxen?
I'm just, my mind was going to like next fitness challenge, like us sprinting the length of a football field to demonstrate the size of an acre. So I think I would win that one.
Yeah, how many acres can you sprint?
Who can hand plow an acre the quickest?
I think we can incorporate this somehow in the next fitness challenge, Tim. My mind's going, so that'll be great. Yeah, and then in our new role at Polaris, we're learning a whole nother kind of set of ag adjacent units of measure, right? Specifically around the irrigation pumps. And so now Tim and I everything we're thinking about is in kilowatts. And the latest conversion that I had to think through a lot recently was horsepower to kilowatts, because the pump there's a nameplate horsepower on it, and there's just kind of a conversion factor of 0.746 to kilowatts. But that kilowatts is, again, that's correlated to the nameplate horsepower, but that doesn't necessarily mean the operating, what the pump is operating at, or its max kW versus average running kW. So this is the latest unit of measure that is making my head spin lately.
Do you have a little Post-it note on your desk so you are ready to go?
I'm not a Post-it note like you are. I'm not a Post-it note. I just have like a messy desk, and then what my messy notes are on the app Notes. I have like thousands and thousands of notes that I rarely return to, but it feels good to write something down at the time. So that's how we keep things straight. Well, this has been fun, Ariel, talking about, math and ag. And I think it's super important, right? Like, I think it's on the surface, it's, this is generally, we can understand that this is important, but it is so critical both for the farmer, both for companies serving agriculture because of all the nuance between crops. So thanks for shedding some light on that. Thanks a lot, Ariel. We appreciate you being on.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, subscribe to Ariel's newsletter, Topsoil. You don't want to miss the next edition. Hope you guys enjoy. Have a great Thanksgiving week with time with friends and family. Stay safe, and we will talk to you next week.